Right, Felix, and you sort of said you took over from your dad. And you've kept up with the writing, and I think most people would agree that even though it's developed, it is in the same style and the same sort of vein as your father wrote. Can we assume that your sort of readers have moved through the generations as you have with your dad? So would you get any sort of feedback from people?
Yes, I get feedback. I mean, I do get a lot of people who say, "Well, I used to read your father's books," and I say, "Well, do you read mine?" And they say no, and I say, "Well, give them a try." Um, and a lot of people have given them a try and are not disappointed. In fact, my German publisher recently said that he thought that my latest books were as good as if not better than my father's. So that was a great. I mean, I'm not sure I agree with him, but it was a great compliment to give me. But I really, how I took over was a bit of a surprise to everyone, including me, I might add. I'd been working for my father as his manager. I was a teacher, and then I stopped being a teacher and I became a businessman. And while I was a company director, I also took on the role of managing my parents' affairs, everything from investment management to changing the light bulbs. And uh, and my parents decided that they would retire. They wanted to retire in 1999, and they went to Ascot to give the book to the Queen Mother. And my father was going to just about to tell her that he was going to, that they were this would be the last one. But he'd always said to the Queen Mother, "Could I dedicate a book to you?" And she'd always wagged her finger at him and said, "Only when I'm 100." And of course, she was 100 the next year. So she said to my parents, "I'm so looking forward to my book next year." And I remember driving my parents home from Ascot and my mother saying, and my father in deep despair saying, "Oh no, we've got to do it again. We've got to do it again." So they did it one more time and wrote a book called Shattered, which was very well named. When I went out to their home in the Caribbean where they lived because my mother's health was bad, uh, um, the book was, with 1 week to go to deadline day, the book was only two-thirds written. And my parents were both in a complete panic about it. So I literally sat down at their dining room table and wrote the last third of the book in a week. I would write it, we would discuss it. The book went in on time, and and as I said, it was called Shattered. It was about glass blowing, but it was the title said everything. And the book was published in October 2000, in September 2000, I should say. And they announced that that would be their last one and they were retiring. And my mother's long and happy retirement lasted for about 3 weeks and she died of a heart attack. So it was one book too far. And everyone thought that that would be it. Dad said, "I'm 80 years old and I'm retiring." Mary and I did it together, he said, and with her gone, I couldn't do it alone, so there won't be any more books. And everyone thought that was that. Well, I was still managing my father's affairs, and 5 years later, his literary agent asked me to lunch. We went to the Gay Hussar restaurant in Greek Street in Soho. Sadly, the Gay Hussar is no longer there. Um, but and the agent said, "Felix, we have a problem. All your father's books are going out of print. It's not because the stories aren't good enough. It's because no one is buying them because they're not on the bookshelves any longer. There are 60,000 books published in this country every year. The bookshops haven't got room for the new ones, yet alone the old ones." And what had kept me awake at night as a child were Alistair MacLean books and Desmond Bagley and Hammond Innes and Neville Shute. They're all gone out of print. And the same thing was going to occur to my father's books. And the agent said, "What we need is a new hardback." Well, I looked at him as if he was crazy. My father was now 85. My mother had been dead for 5 years, and it wasn't going to happen. I said, it's not going to happen. He said, well, actually, what I'm asking is your permission to ask an existing crime writer to write a Dick Francis novel by so-and-so. Well, I must have had a few glasses of red wine by then. And I said, well, before you ask anyone else, I would like to have a go. And to his eternal credit, he didn't roll his eyes or laugh or say, why do you think an ex-physics teacher can write a book worthy of the name Dick Francis? He simply said, I'll give you 2 months to write 2 chapters and then we'll see. He meant by we'll see that he would get the permission he was seeking. I wrote the chapters. We had another lunch. He said, well, there's 2 things you've got to do, Felix. One, you better get on and finish it. And secondly, you better go and talk to your father. So I got on to finish it. Talking to my father was more difficult. I said, we need a new hardback. No, he said. I said it could be about race fixing because it was very much in the news because Kieran Fallon was about to go on trial at the Old Bailey for race fixing. And I said it could be a Sid Halley book. Sid had been in 3 books before, and Dad kept saying, no, no, no. And I said, I've got a title. And he said, what title? I said, Under Orders. And he read the chapters. He got very excited by it. I got on and finished it. The book came out in September 2006. It didn't have my name on the cover. It was Dick Francis. In my view, if it was going to promote the backlist, it had to have the name Dick Francis on it. It sold. Of course it sold. It went straight to the top of the bestseller list. It had Dick Francis on the cover, but I was terrified that all the reviews in the Sunday papers would all say, Dick has lost it. But they didn't. They all said, the master is back. And the publisher said, right, we want another one. And so I got started on Dead Heat. And as far as I was concerned, it was going to be exactly the same. Come out as a Dick Francis. But the American publishers took fright of being sued. So it came out with Dick Francis in big letters. And underneath, in the smallest font they could find, and Felix Francis. And one of the reviewers said that they could tell which parts Dick wrote and which parts Felix wrote, which made us both laugh because we both knew that I'd written all of it. And I've been doing it ever since. And I must be doing something right because all the backlists are still in print. And my name's got bigger and his name's got smaller, but this is the latest syndicate. And you will see at the bottom, it still has a Dick Francis novel on the front because I feel that he is still as much a part of my books as I feel a part of all of his. And Dick Francis is now a brand more than an individual. And I've now left my company directorships behind. I'm now a full-time author. And it gives me great pleasure when people say what you do for a living. I say I write the Dick Francis novels. I'm very proud of everything that he did before, and I'm very proud to be able to continue the canon of the work. And long may it go on. I've just heard I've got a new 2-book deal, so I've got another 2 more to do at least, and maybe I'll go on doing it as long as people want to read them.
Okay, well, let's talk about Felix Francis, the author. The first thing you ever published, if I've got my research right, was a physics paper in 1986.
Yes, I wrote the Oxford and Cambridge Board O-level physics paper in 1986. Didn't get paid for it, I might add, but I only got paid my expenses. But yes, and I don't know that it got many good reviews. I mean, probably an awful lot of students all over the place were throwing their pencils at the paper when they read it. But I tried to make it so that it was interesting. Questions were interesting, as well as testing and informative. I wanted to make them interesting. So I remember one of the questions being about estimating the length of tape in a cassette. The cassettes have disappeared, but then the cassettes were around. How long is the tape? if you stretch the tape out completely, how long would the tape be? And it was about being able to make an estimate. Some people knew that the tape went through the machine at 1 7/8 inches per second, which it did, and therefore they knew that the tape was a C90, which was 45 minutes on each side. So how long would the tape be to go 45 minutes to go right through? So some people did it really well. Others just guessed a number, and they didn't get many marks for that. But it was all about being able to make a reasoned guess. But yes, that was the first thing I ever wrote. Well, it was the first thing I had published, I suppose, yes.
Okay, so you talk about the childhood where you walk in and there were TV stars and I assume royalty and people in the house. You're sort of immersed in the world of horse racing via the books and your dad's past. Yes. But you followed an academic career. So was that sort of a bit of rebellion, or was there ever any push for you to become something in racing?
Well, I rode as a child, but I had a lot of hip trouble when I was 15. I spent 5 months lying on my back in an orthopedic hospital in Oxford. And it meant that I had restricted movement in my left hip. I still do. It meant I couldn't really ride a horse. I couldn't spread my knees wide enough to sit astride a horse. So I had to give up riding, and also I couldn't do things like play rugby or football at the time because I spent a year and a bit walking around on crutches, and I took to doing my sport lying down, which was rifle shooting. But I was always more interested in academia, I think, than in getting up. And my father always felt that to get proper, to get full benefit of riding a horse, it had to be done very early in the morning. Preferably when it was still dark and raining. And I was always rather more fond of my bed than I was of going out with a torch, searching the field for the pony in the dark in order to get up on the gallops in the freezing cold. I would never have said in my father's hearing, but I was always of the opinion that both ends were dangerous and the middle was uncomfortable. One end kicks and the other end bites. But I love watching them. I love going racing. I think horses are incredibly elegant. We have dogs, and I love watching the dogs in full gallop as well, because there is something really elegant about the way an animal moves, and horses have always been. I mean, artists have tried to capture the movement of a horse for centuries because it's such a pleasing sight.
And so your career as a teacher lasted how long?
I was 17 years teaching A-level physics in 3 different schools. And I really only stopped it because my father needed someone to manage him. And I said to him on one occasion, I used to go and work for him half terms and school holidays, and I never got to have a rest from teaching. And I said to him one day, I said, look, I can't do this anymore. I'm head of a department. I'm doing all the assessment work and for GCSE, which had just come in. I said, what you need is a manager. And he said, would I be prepared to give up my day job? And I said, but you don't pay me for what I do for you. And he said, I'll pay you twice what you're getting now. Well, difficult to turn that down.